to introduce our next speaker. Most people know him for his excellence defending plays on the basketball court, first at Duke University and then for Memphis, Houston, and Miami. In that order, I think. Okay, correct. Now Shane Battier is defending civic learning and responsibility. Much like Justice O'Connor in her retirement, now in his retirement, at least as a professional player with the NBA, he's not truly retired. He's doing something about the civic engagement deficit and facilitates tomorrow's leaders through his Take Charge Foundation. We are honored to welcome Shane Battier to the podium.
All right, when I point to this side of the room, I want you to say, do good. When I point to this side of the room, I want you to say, do well. All right, so do well, do good. Okay, ready? Got that? Ready?
Do well. Do good. Do well. Do good.
Louder.
Do well. Do good. Do well.
Louder. Louder.
Do well. Do good. Do well. Do good.
All right, thank you. Now we're awake. Now we're awake. Don't you feel good? You got the endorphins going. We're a little awake now. All right. Thank you. That happens to be the motto of my foundation, the Battier Take Charge Foundation. And for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about why investing in civic involvement, civic education is important. And I can't, to be honest with you, I can't really add anything that I haven't heard from the amazing people on stage to this point in the program. And so I'd like to just give you why I'm involved. I'm not an educator. I'm not a policymaker. I'm not a wonk. I'm just a guy who won the genetic lottery, had a pretty good jump shot, and won a couple championships. Mostly just passing to LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and saying, shoot, guys, shoot. So for that reason, I'm here today. And so I've been very, very blessed to do well in my life, in a professional standpoint. But I was so lucky to have parents who taught me, you know what, success in your life, climbing that ladder is all great and gravy. But if you don't do good with the platform that you create, with what you've created professionally, that success is all hollow. And that's something that stayed with me from a kindergartner all the way to today. So that's why I'm here, to do good. Well, I like to focus on the do part. Because to me, democracy is not a passive form of government. Democracy is an active form of government. It only operates at its highest level when you participate, right? Our forefathers, when they were doing the equivalent of Snapchat back in 1776, back then it was just called chatting. Believe it or not, at one point people actually talked to each other. They said, to change the course of our people, of our grandchildren, of our grandchildren's grandchildren, we want to make a government where people participate, where it's active, where you're involved. There's a sense of duty. Now listen, I grew up in a locker room essentially. I spent more time in a locker room looking at naked, sweaty men than I did my own family for about 20 years of my life. And so for me, being part of a team is all I know. And to me, that's what civics is. It was a lesson that was instilled in me by my parents when I was a young boy, that you have to look at democracy as sort of Team America. And you have to play your role. Now, when I was with the Miami Heat, Coach Eric Spoelstra didn't say, hey, Shane, I need you to be the best small forward in the league. No, he said, hey, Shane, as a member of this Heat, I need you to be the best small forward that you can be so our team can be the best in the league. And that's what democracy is. And that's what civic education leads to. It's an understanding of, hey, we all have a role in this. We all are a team member. And it may not be the most glamorous. You may not have a fancy title. You may not be a governor, a senator, a director. But we all play a role and making democracy and making our country as strong as it can be. And that's a message that we need to promote. And we need to promote with our dollars, with our platforms, with our channels of publicity to the millennial age kids, to the kids who will be the leaders of tomorrow. And that's a message, unfortunately, that's getting distorted and even lost a little bit. The importance of being part of a team. Being part of the best team in the world. Yes, does this team have off nights every now and then? Team America? Yeah, okay, we do. But at the end of the day, you know what? We are LeBron, we are Kobe, we are Michael Jordan rolled into one. But only when we are together as one. And so today, we're going to get a little perspective on two awesome students who are kicking butt now, who are part of the Florida program and the Illinois Civics program. And we're going to hear firsthand how their civic education has impacted their lives and has led to greater good for not only them, but their states and our country as a whole. And so I would like to bring up the moderator for this. He's an absolute superstar, Mr. Stephen Olikara, who is the director of the Millennials Action Project. And he is charged with the unenviable position to work with administrators and legislators to avoid partisan gridlock to help shape the policy that will affect today's millennials, tomorrow's leaders. And so, Stephen, God bless you. You have a great job ahead of you, but you are the man for the job. And so I'd like to introduce Stephen Olikara. Please welcome Stephen to the stage.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. It's great to be here. Thank you to iCivics and the great team of partners who have convened this discussion and brought us together for this critically important topic of civic education. As I look across this room, I see a lot of friends, a lot of partners, advisors who've been integral in the Millennial Action Project existing and being able to do the work that we do. So just on behalf of the Millennial Action Project, thank you for believing in our cause and believing in our mission. And as many of you know, I do panels every so often, but what's unique about this is I get to moderate my tallest panelist ever in Shane. I mean, he will reach the height record among the panels that I've done. And we'll see how long we can go with the basketball metaphor. I'll be the point guard for the panel. We'll see how long we can keep this going. But what we're going to talk about today is the next generation of our democracy. And one of the great threats facing our republic today is the increasing disillusionment and disengagement among millennials from our system of government. Unfortunately, today, only about 35% of millennials believe that in our institutions of democracy. Over half of us don't believe that politics will solve the problems that we face, and less than a third of us see public service as an appealing career track. Now, when you hear these stats, you typically start to say, well, millennials are apathetic, they're disengaging. That's been the common narrative, and I want to combat that narrative today because millennials at the same time have the highest levels of service participation in the country. Millennials today are actually our most civically engaged and socially idealistic generation. So what we're confronted today is really a disconnect between our idealism to make change in our communities and our distrust and lack of confidence in government. So that's what we're going to talk about today because I think civic education is a key opportunity and leverage point to close that gap. And so I want to bring our panel out because we're going to discuss that today with an educator, Mabel, from Miami, Florida. We have Shane, obviously, you know Shane. We've got Zach, who's a junior at Georgetown. And we've got Herminia from Illinois. So let's give them a round of applause. All right, well, let's get started here. I'm going to start with our students on the far end of the panel here. We were talking backstage, Herminia and I. Herminia is a junior in high school in Chicago. And two of the states that we're going to be looking at today in particular, because they've undergone some key reforms, is Illinois and Florida. But let's start with Herminia. We were talking backstage about the Student Voice Committee that you've been engaged in, and that's been a big opportunity for many students in your school, but particularly you, to get involved in civic opportunities. So if you can first tell us more about that. What is it? What kind of impact has that experience had on your life, and what do you think we can learn from creating structures like the Student Voice Committee?
So Student Voice Committee, to me, is an opportunity to build adult and student partnerships. And this is awesome because there's a safe place where students can come and talk about the issues that are going on in school and that sometimes staff might not be aware of. So this makes us feel more as part of the school instead of just a place that we go to just do your work, get a grade, and go home. So us as students, we're really engaged in this because it's like, as I said, a safe place where we could go and like, I heard this and this is happening in school. I think we could do this to solve it. So we gather our research and we go to the decision makers in the school. And how can I say this? Sometimes like everybody says like we have to educate the students and educate like the students in the school in general. But for us, it's more like educating the adults and saying we feel oppressed because of this. Adultism, racism, and it's like just an open door to express what we really feel. And I feel like this civic learning really does empower students to participate in their community as young people, and for their future lives, when they grow up, they will know what to do and they will learn to not just stay quiet and to always participate in their community.
Wow, well said. And would you say the Student Voice Committee sparked your passion for civics, or did that interest precede your experience with the committee?
Yes, I had already been like organizing stuff, and I had already been really engaged in the community. So Student Voice Committee is just another place where I could go and voice my opinions on the school because I care a lot about my school. That's
great. All right, let's go to Zach here. So Zach is now a junior at Georgetown in the School of Business, but grew up in Florida, in Tallahassee. And we were talking about this experience that you had in 7th grade because we want to shine a spotlight on this. The Sandra Day O'Connor Civic Education Act particularly has changed the face of civic education at the middle school level in Florida. And you were saying that actually Justice O'Connor came to your middle school in 7th grade. So tell us more about that experience in 7th grade and why that changed your life.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so my experience in 7th grade civics was one that really did become a pivotal moment in, my educational career and how I, kind of saw the world around me. And the reason being is because the civics class that I experienced was something that taught me about the government and this larger system that previous to that I wasn't that familiar with. And by teaching me that, it's not just a system that exists outside my control, but something that I can take a part in, it really, educated me as a student and as a future participating citizen about the opportunities that I can take advantage of, and that, we see on the media today, the larger leaders of our government, the national, the federal government, but there are so many other public servants that are within, smaller community roles, local roles, state roles, and the civics education class really taught me about all the opportunities to get involved. And so Sandra Day O'Connor, I had the opportunity to see and to meet with her, and that was a really, really big moment for me to be able to see somebody who, you read about in textbooks, you see on TV, and to actually meet that person in real life and see how great and honestly nice she was, as well as willing to talk to students and get to know what we felt and getting to know, what we were interested in learning about. That was really important, as well as as also getting to, I also got to meet Senator Bob Graham and hear him speak, as he was a pivotal member of, really creating this initiative. And a quote he said to me, and something that was actually painted in my civics class, is that citizenship is not just a spectator sport, and this is something that's really stuck around with me. That to be a citizen in a democracy, and kind of like you were saying earlier, it's an active role. You need to be not just spectating and watching what's happening around you, but if you really want to make a difference, take a chance and take an opportunity. And so that was a kind of a roundabout way of answering your question. But
Yeah. Oh. Well, first of all, it sounds like your middle school is a real powerhouse of speaker recruitment. I don't think my college was able to get speakers like that. Anyway, well, let's go to Mabel. And you're a teacher in West Miami, and we talked about this briefly, but it sounds like your community, your property, your family are safe post-hurricane.
Yes, they are. Thank you.
And so you've been kind of on the front lines of civic education, working with students. What have you found to be the most important resources to connect students with civic learning? And we talked about the Civic Education Act. I'm not sure if that's been particularly helpful, or perhaps there are other resources that you got that were able to really kind of bolster your efforts to create civic learning opportunities.
Oh, we have many resources for civics learning, the same for not only for faculty, but also for the students. We have learning video games. We have PowerPoints that are offered to us for the students. We have vocabulary, which they learn through songs.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my students last year, when they took, not one, but several, when they took the end of course exam, they told me that their videos, not the videos, I'm sorry, the songs that they had learned through vocabulary had helped them answer the questions. So we have many resources.
Very nice. And one thing that would be, I think, helpful for this audience is if you can maybe pinpoint if there are any particular moments that you've seen in working with your students where you've just seen that light bulb go off. Is there any kind of moment you can share with us?
Yes, I do a lot of current events. Now remember, I work with the students that have emigrated to the United States, that when they go home, all they talk about is about their country. So I feel that it's my job to teach them about this country. We do current events. We engage them, I engage them into forming their own opinion about these current events. They do posters that about social issues that then they take into other classrooms and debate with the other students. We hold mock elections, mock trials. Actually, in the mock elections, we do, they choose their president for the class.
Wow. Fantastic. Now let's go to Shane. And Shane, you also mentioned your family property, All Safe in Miami. And your foundation you were mentioning focuses not only in Miami, but in Detroit and in a couple other cities. And you're focused on opportunity youth and underserved communities. Where have you seen that light bulb go off? What sort of connection points have you found made the most impact in the young people you're working with?
Yeah, well, Brian Brady's comments really struck a chord with me about action. And we have a retreat every year for all of our scholarship recipients, kids who are in really tough neighborhoods and are in college, being exposed to things for the first time really in the world. And when we present something and we bring in a speaker from the government, a friend who works here in Washington came and spoke to them, you can almost see the shock of like, wow, you could do this for a living? You can impact and help people from a governmental position for a living? And I think it's just so important to expose, especially young people, on the different ways they want to help. All right? I genuinely believe that most people want to help, they want to pitch in, they want to do the right thing, they don't know how. Yeah. And so exposing them to different channels, different avenues, different people who have done it, the inspiration those kids gain from just seeing it and touching it firsthand, it's priceless.
Yeah, I think that touches on something very important that we've seen in our work. Not all of us can have Justice O'Connor stop by our middle school. However, we can have our local and state and sometimes national elected officials come to our schools. And that's been very powerful to see it through our work. We work with young lawmakers in particular, and when they go into local schools, they are able to really shine a spotlight on what you can do in public service. And often that's contradictory to what you see in the national headlines. The dominant narrative in politics today, unfortunately, is cynicism. You can't make a difference. It doesn't work. And so to have some of these examples coming in to provide that exposure, I think, is very important. Now, one dimension of this, I think, is in terms of civic education that we focus on, was referenced in the previous panel, is our ability to have constructive and civil discourse as we're developing our civic education skills. So I want to go back to the students here, and I'll go to Herminia. As your fellow classmates have been involved in the Student Voice Committee and you've been involved in civic education experiences, do you feel like you've had civil and constructive dialogue, or where have you seen opportunities to have dialogue with people who are very different from you, different backgrounds, who have different perspectives on politics? Do you feel like your school has been able to set the right frame and context for those types of discussions?
Well, in our classrooms, in our everyday classrooms, there's teachers that often expose us to different opinions and different perspectives of stories and stuff. So when a story or a discussion is being brought in class, we always try to look at the other side. And that's how we figure out like the whole story, and we understand it better. So I think our school does play a role where they allow us to be exposed to all these different types of point of views and stories.
And a related question to Zach, obviously our generation and now the post-millennial or Gen Z generation is communicating in very different ways than prior generations have. How have you seen political discourse evolve just during your time involved in civics, and how do you think that's different than maybe previous generations have experienced civil discourse?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And one thing that actually me and a lot of my friends have discussed is this idea of an echo chamber that a lot of people will get, especially when you're looking at social media. So throughout this last election cycle, you had a lot of students who were posting things on Facebook, posting things on Twitter, but a lot of times the people who they're friends with are of the same views. They don't really have many different views. And so you have people that are all kind of reaffirming each other. So to that student or that person, they're thinking, why is anybody else thinking anything different than what I'm thinking? Everybody else agrees with me. Everybody likes my Facebook post. Everybody retweets my tweet. But the thing is it's because of how those systems work, they tend to be around people who think the same things. So I think when we're looking at education, one really critically important idea is something that Herminia spoke to, which is thinking about the other side. Having students, really consider, there isn't just an other side because there always has to be an other side. People really think about that other idea for a reason. And so what is that reason? Is it because of their background? Is it because of an experience that they've had? And try to come up with those shared experiences so that way students can really come to think about, why does this other side exist and how can I have a discussion? Because I think a lot of times right now people are like, especially people in my generation, I have this idea and I think it's right, and so I'm just going to say it's right. And a lot of people will say, I'm going to retweet that. But why is it right? Why do you think that? And how can you have a discussion about why you think it's right? And I think that is something that you have an unparalleled opportunity in the classroom to really pursue, is discovering why people think the way they do and why they have these certain opinions.
Yeah.
Zach, what motivates some of your friends, Herminia, to actually act instead of just tweeting or snapping about it?
I think it's when they see something with personal experience. If you're in an experience when you see something, a piece of policy, a piece of government action that directly affects you. I'll give you an example currently right now. The DACA program that was just announced that it was most likely going to end, that affects a lot of students at Georgetown University. Prior to the announcement that it was ending, you had some students who were posting on Facebook, changing their profile picture, things like that. As soon as the announcement that it came to end, you saw a massive movement on Georgetown's campus with students coming up with letter writing campaigns, phone banks, things of these nature. So I think it's immediately when students realize this is going to impact my experience or an experience of somebody I know, when they can relate it back to something that they realize and they recognize, and it's not just something that's out there, but it's something that is going to affect their experience, that's when I see students acting.
And I want to pick up on an important thing you mentioned, Zach, because I think this audience understands that it is crucial right now that in civic education, our students are learning how to listen to different viewpoints, how to discuss political topics with people of different political backgrounds. And you mentioned the role of technology, the likes on Facebook, the retweets on Twitter. I think 10 years ago, the thinking with technology and social media was that it would have a democratizing effect on our political process. More people could get involved. But it's also had this interesting impact of creating, as you mentioned, Zach, echo chambers, self-reinforcing echo chambers. And I worry that it constricts our ability to flex those constructive civil discourse muscles that we really need to be flexing early on in young people's lives. So first of all, I'm curious, do you agree with the way I'm framing that? And if you have any ideas, let us know.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that idea that, we're continuing towards a trend of people seeing things that they agree with on social media. But, a comment of something that educators and policymakers could really do to combat that is, getting students to kind of take a step out of their comfort zone. Not necessarily become so uncomfortable, but, truly have an experience of, experiential learning was one of the things that I remember the most, especially coming from a 7th grade class. That was a few years ago for me. For you all, that was like a long time ago in my life. And so, but for me, I might necessarily remember the PowerPoints that went up. I might not necessarily remember the essay that I wrote. But what I will remember is that opportunity that I had to do a mock trial, that opportunity that I had to debate with my classmates in front of other people and have that true experience where I was actually experiencing the debating. Have a student who feels a really strong way one way, debate the other side. Say, you don't have to believe this, go do research, figure out why they think that way, and come debate that way. And that's a very small, minor experience, but these kind of experiences where students are actually engaging and saying let me place myself in somebody's shoes who thinks this, that's how they can really, understand. And then from there, they'll start saying, why don't I follow a conservative or a liberal, Twitter account or a Facebook page, and why don't I see what they're thinking? Why don't I figure out why these people are thinking that way? But it all has to start somewhere, and that place that for me started in my civics class.
Yeah, we've done workshops similar to that, and I think it's very effective. And Mabel, I'm curious, you mentioned mock trials and debate and activities like that. I'm curious, during your teaching profession, have you seen any changes over time in students' abilities to understand the other side?
Oh, most definitely they do. I have, we debate, and we have two sides, or even more than two sides, but yes, they do, and they're very firm in what they believe. Obviously, this is before I have taught them, and they have done research about the debate that we're performing. Yes, but they do. They have their own opinions, and they stick to them.
And it seems like opportunities like mock trial debate are really important to kind of flex those civic learning and civil discourse muscles. Which activity do you think has been the most effective out of the many that you mentioned?
Which action?
Or which activities, or which, yeah.
Well, I do a lot of hands-on activities, and I think they're all important. The election of the president of the class, they enjoy it very much because it gives them hands-on experience on what it's like to choose a president. The mock trials, I'm usually the judge in the mock trials. And what they also like to do, and we do a lot, if there's an issue in the school, they will gather signatures and present their opinion and the signatures to the principal of the school. So that gives them real life experience of what they can do with our in our political system.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one more question to Shane, and then we're going to open it up to audience question and answer. So get your questions ready. But Shane, I'm curious why you decided to focus your foundation on engaging young people. Yeah. And I wonder if you had any experiences growing up when you were young that maybe influenced how you think about the focus of your foundation.
Yeah. Well, to go back to the earlier exercise, do well, do good. I was lucky. I was blessed to have basketball to give me amazing opportunity. I grew up in a household that, my parents robbed Peter to pay Paul every week. And so without basketball, I would not be here today. No question about it. And so I believe that in creating opportunities, and I believe in taking advantage of opportunities. And you know, for me, getting involved in civics goes back to the first grade, I'll never forget this, reflections contest. I don't know if they still have those anymore. Reflection contest. And our reflection contest was, what does freedom mean to you? And so I remember sitting with my mom, and she said, well, what's freedom mean to you? I said, well, living in America. What's living in America about? Well, freedom of speech, and freedom of worship, and freedom of press. And I actually drew, I remember, like it was yesterday, I drew this picture of the Statue of Liberty, and all around them a person going to a synagogue, and a newspaper reporter writing an article, and someone on a soapbox going like that. And although I didn't win the $10 gift certificate, I think it was that singular moment that sparked my interest of like, yeah, you know, I'm an American. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. And there are responsibilities and there are freedoms, and it's my duty to play a role. And that feeling has stuck with me ever since that reflections contest.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Now it's your turn to ask questions. All right.
Hi, my name's Kristen, and I'd love to continue the basketball metaphor a little bit. Shane, to prepare you to be a great basketball player, you probably had more than just a coach, right? So if we were to take the analogy of your kind of Team America experience, and we were to analogize the head coach of your team to being a teacher in school, maybe you also had like a personal trainer, and you had some kids that you did pickup games with on the weekend. Like there was probably a system of support around you that helped you be prepared to play on the team other than the coach. And so if that's true, I'd love to hear from the students, from Herminia and Zach in particular, outside of your in-school experience, what supports do you feel like you have, and how does your community in other ways rally around you in out-of-school or maybe at-home contexts that help enrich your experience and help you feel prepared to be members of Team America?
Anything to say? Yeah, so I can go ahead and speak a little bit to my experience that I had in Tallahassee. I'd say that the civics class was the first experience that I had, and it really led to a lot of other amazing experiences. So in civics class, one of the other experiential learning activities that we had was community service requirements. And in these requirements, we had to go out and do community service in our community. And from there, I actually got to meet some really great people who were involved in an organization called Kiwanis. And Kiwanis is a service organization similar to that of Rotary. And so what Kiwanis does is they also focus on children and really trying to help develop children. And so I got involved in Key Club, and I really got involved in the community. And I'd say that was a system of service leaders throughout my community who really pushed me to serve the community and learn more about my community and become engaged. Because while it is a lot about government, it's mainly about community engagement. How can you get involved with the community leaders, and really improve your community?
All right.
My civics interest started as I started high school. I started realizing that people in my community didn't really express their opinions because I do come from a predominantly Mexican immigrant community. So my community is almost taught to just be quiet, be happy with what you get. Don't complain too much because at some point you might not get something. So I feel like it was my responsibility to stand up for them and be their voice in a way. Like in school, outside of school, I try to get involved as much as possible because, it's my community and I love it.
All right, we have one more.
Hi, my question's going to be for Mabel. I'm Cynthia Bader, a teacher here in DC at National Cathedral School. And so as a teacher, I'd love for others in our room here today to hear from you, Mabel, on either the lesson you most look forward to doing every year or your fondest moment you've had in the classroom teaching civics.
My favorite lesson to teach is the course system. Before I became a teacher, I used to work for the court system. I was a clerk of the courts, and I worked with many judges that are now in federal court. So therefore, I'm not so knowledgeable about it, but I do love, and I know a little bit about it, so I love to teach that. And of course, when we do the mock trials, I do love to be the judge.
Very, very good. Well, just in closing here, first of all, thank you to iCivics and all the partners for our chance to have this discussion. And I'll just close with where we started with this video here. When we think about our focus on young people and the legacy of our country since the founders, I think it's important to remember that the founders were wearing powdered wigs. The founders were wearing powdered wigs, and we often forget, as we learn the history of our founding, that the founders were basically a band of young upstarts. They were millennial aged when they created the system of self-government, and they had the image there of Thomas Jefferson, who lived to be 83 years old, but he wrote the Declaration of Independence when he was 33. James Madison, who helped author the Constitution, lived to be 85 years old, but he wrote the Constitution when he was 36, and the Federalist Papers when he was 36. The majority of the Founding Fathers in 1776 were under the age of 40. And so we need to think about that when we focus on civic education, because we know that young people are going to be our greatest hope and our greatest vehicle for transformation in our country and our best chance to revitalize our democracy. So thank you very much, and we'll be here for questions afterwards. So thank you.